Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Citizens Commission on Elected Official Compensation to order. The first agenda item is going to be the approval of the minutes from our August 28th, 2018 meeting. And may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any revisions, changes?
None.
Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Approving? Aye. They are now approved. And next, we will enter a discussion about the recommendations that we have made. I guess we're looking at them, the collective.
Mr. Chairman, let me start by going over the items that were given to you today. They were at your place when you sat down. First of all, of course, you had your agenda and your minutes. Next document should be a table titled Suggested Elected Official Compensation Recommendations. This has been updated from what was emailed to you earlier because we had another commissioner send in their suggestions this morning. I was able to get the table updated, so you now have 4 suggested recommendations in front of you on that table. The next document is the actual, or the next 4 documents, I'm sorry, 2 Excel spreadsheets and 2 smaller 8.5 by 11 documents are the actual emails or charts that I received from commissioners making those recommendations. I wanted you to know that I didn't make any changes to them from what was submitted to me to what is on this compilation chart. The final document is a memorandum from Chief of Staff Mike Brown from Columbus City Council regarding the thought processes behind the city auditor's recommendations that he brought to me this morning. So those are the documents that you have before you. I think that probably the commission will work mainly from the suggested elected official compensation recommendations document. It also might be helpful for commissioners to have at least somewhere in their vicinity the charts that Greg prepared in the last meeting regarding projections. Because I think a lot of the suggestions were based upon these particular documents.
If I could, point of clarification then, the recommendation submitted, I guess I just want to be certain that everyone knew and understood that, that the base salary that we were working from was all the same. So from that perspective, I guess from the commissioner's perspective.
And that's kind of where we were, the earlier discussion. I viewed the base salary at what was set in 2015. And that's how I defined in my analysis the base salary. What I perhaps failed to do, and I'm just speaking for myself to help maybe get some further clarification from other commissioners. And so in my thinking, 185,000, and with whatever COLA formula was given, it would increase to an amount into 2022, and then I took that amount thinking that was a base salary, a second base. So I went from a 185 base to a 205 base, thinking that was the mathematical formulation. What I am being advised today, and it makes all the sense in the world, that the COLA is actually a step up.
Right.
Year over year, and that by doing so, that's one thing, it's a step up year over year. second of all, the numbers we were looking at were projected
Right.
CPI and not a fixed, I was treating it fixed.
Got it.
It was so it could turn out that the mayor's not making 205,000. I'm using the mayor, but this probably applies also to the auditor and city attorney. Will not, a circumstance could come about where the increases are less than what was projected, and therefore his salary actually was reduced. And, but, or it could be
Okay.
more, but
And
I don't think.
I think, I guess for the commissioners who are here, I don't think it's any of our, well, I won't speak for everyone. It's not my intention to reduce the salary for any of the elected officials, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I just want to.
Well, that's me. I'm with you on that.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
so,
just so
three
we're
of
on
us
the same-
agree with
yeah,
that. Yeah,
perfect.
it was never an intention
Okay.
to reduce.
Got it,
It was trying to create the parity
sense.
within the industry.
got it.
Yeah.
Do we want to, having clarified that, that's helpful, I think, from that perspective. Would we want to take up some of these recommendations and look at where we are with the mayor specifically?
Well, but has there been any comments received with respect to the city attorney and I'm sorry, the city council and the president of council? I think, were we projecting increases in those categories? Because they weren't discussed.
So,
Does it turn out we are increasing or not?
The table we have, so I can clarify this a little bit too, or I see clarification on the same question as well. The table that we have, that has the updated COLAs with 1.99%, for council members, this would be if we did nothing, correct?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I just want to make sure everyone's looking at the correct table.
Yep.
The table should say, well, first page happens to be the mayor. Mayor projected salary table, 1.48% COLA
Okay, I'm not-
added to base salary.
Which document are you looking at? The document?
It's the projected table. I just want to make sure because there were two, yes, there were two floating out there. The 1.99% is not valid. And the reason for that is because based on Dr. Lafayette's presentation, we went back and changed that to the 1.48%
Okay.
that we had discussed last time. That was the national CPI, urban, all units, as opposed to the Midwest, which was 0.92%.
Great, just so, we were all looking at the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
And you can see there in each one of them, in the top left corner is the base salary, what it would be, an estimated base salary, what it would be in 2021 based on the projections of 1.99% for the years 2018 through 2021. So in order to help this commission, we took that last base salary and added the percentages going down in the first column, and then, of course, that 1.48% COLA for each year up to 2025.
I don't see a chart with the 1.48.
You can have
Have
one
extra
extra
copies, that would be helpful for us to have, for chair to have.
Both of mine at 1.9. I have two charts, and it looks like there was a slight change,
This is the summary,
but they
and
both
the
are
rest of those are-
tables at 1.99.
This is 1.48, do you
I have the 1.48.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Oh,
he
okay.
doesn't.
Oh, okay.
I did not print that one out, sorry.
Yeah, if we could get copies, make sure we're all looking from the same one.
Mr. Chairman, do you have the?
No, I
I know
think,
they emailed it. and
these
I
are
didn't
these are
print it
different
out.
numbers in these columns, so I
They
don't.
are, yes. Let me get another copy for you.
So, I think one of the things that, just to bring you up to speed, we clarified that the base salary here is the amount that we'd be working from.
Yes.
Okay, so, just so we're on the same
Thank
page.
you.
There was some confusion about that, with some of the recommendations that were submitted. So, no, and then
Got
we
it.
also just all agreed that we do not want to reduce, the salary of any of the current elected officials.
Okay,
That's all we covered.
perfect.
Oh, I took hers. You can, if you need to take it to copy it.
We're making copies.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
So these printouts here are individual. Yes.
I did update the actual chart with your actual number.
Thank you. I just looked through and I saw that you gotta add, sorry about that.
No, that's
My
okay.
explanation said one thing and the number on the left said something else.
This one is the one that is.
That compiles
consolidated.
everybody. Got it. I have Greg's copy of this, so maybe.
I'll just take one.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Okay,
he can have one back now.
this changes.
It all works out in the end.
So based upon, okay, one more time. The prior chart, projected salary table 1.99 shows the mayor's salary in 2022 to reach 205,571. And that is the number you're using as the base salary.
If I could show you, the base salary is this
The-
one, I
yes.
think is from the end of the last period for the review process. So that's where we're starting from.
And the 2022, we're adding a 1.48 assumed CPI. That would bring the mayor to 208,000. Base.
208,613.
So if we did nothing except adopt the CPI,
The only thing
that would be his base salary.
Yes, sir. The only thing that would change would be the COLA, which would be 1.48%. The projection, again, was 1.99% last time, but we don't know going forward what each year that cost of living adjustment will be until that year is nearly over.
Okay.
So again, just using projections because that's all we have. That's where these
And
tables
I think
came from.
Dr. Lafayette was projecting something less than that based upon the particular CPI that we were using, that the city
So-
was.
Yes, sir.
If the commission used the same CPI that the 2015 commission used, the CPI that would start in 2022 would be 0.92%.
Yes, okay.
When he suggested instead that we use the nationwide all items CPI, that projected CPI for 2022, starting in 2022, would be 1.48%.
Okay, and then I see an urban all items. Do
That-
we know what that would be?
Urban all items national is.
Is the 1.48?
Yes.
Okay,
And that was his recommendation.
okay. So that part we seemingly have agreement upon. Okay, we can take that off the table.
Yep.
We'll vote eventually to formally confirm, but I think what Lee says to CPI, we're good. You comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Next question is the mayor's salary. And I will concede to everyone, I was using, I misinterpreted what base meant.
Without outing you, Mr. Chair, are you the 200 on item 4?
No, I was a 205,
Oh, okay, well, that's correct.
571.
That is correct as far as
Well,
our
I saw
start.
that as increasing the base
Oh.
from 185 to 205, but but that actually, the base has already been increased to 205.
Correct.
And so the question is, do we want to go over that, right?
And again, theoretically, it's been increased to 205,571 under the scenario of using a 1.99% cost of living adjustment each of those years up to 2021.
And then the percentages along the black box here, if we offered a 1% increase, 2% increase, it was showing across the line where we project it would end up at the end, whoever is mayor in 2025. That's what they would be paid.
If you look, if we accept, and I think we all have, that we're not going to go below the 205, 571, then the question, I think, can be narrowed down to, do you want to leave it at 205, 571? The highest amongst the four, happens to be mine, is, not that it's right, was 210. So I think we're going to
I
say
think your
it's,
210 is probably the right number.
well,
If we're trying to stay, you know, in relative terms.
yeah, and let me just say for the record, I realize trying to guess what the CPI is going to be is only a guess. But looking at a big picture, I would say when you look at wages in general, you get 1.5% or less. That historically has been a low number, forgetting all that goes into the index. I mean, if we just talk about salaries in general, talk about negotiation for labor management, 1.5% is at the bottom of the range. So, I mean, that was, I agree, we're going to use, I think, the 1.48, but what I'm saying is, looking at it from today, I think that's a conservative number when compared with what has been historic increases in salaries for employees and executives over a long period of time. So after saying that speech, I would say I'm still on the 210. I don't think we should go above that. And if others want to persuade me to go less than that, I'm certainly open to it.
I'd be willing to go to 10 as well.
Well, when you say that, I would adjust just slightly to 210,700 to keep the 1%, to make it a 1%.
Mr. Chairman, I think that staff would suggest that instead of talking a specific number, because you don't really know what the number is going to be, that the commission consider a percentage increase to the base salary that will exist in 2021. Now, we can project that a 1% increase in the mayor's base salary from 2021 will result in a base salary in 2022 of $210,700. That may actually not be the actual number come January 1st of 2022, because we simply do not know what the mayor's salary will be, because we don't know the CPIs, on December 31st of 2021.
So you're suggesting we give strictly percentages rather than dollar numbers?
Correct.
And we would, just so I'm clear too, the assumption then would be that if we said an additional 1%, it would potentially be 210,700 if that was the base pay increase.
Correct. It could potentially be 210,700. It could potentially be more than that. It could potentially be less than that. Now, the commission can say, based on the projections we have, we're going to set it at 210,700, which is a 1% increase from our projections, or the projections we've been provided. And I think that's a legitimate recommendation from the commission.
Except that, yeah, I'm not disagreeing at all with anything you just said, except that we are experiencing a CPI significantly lower than what was projected. It was projected at
Right.
1.9, and what did you say, it was like 0.9?
The point,
In 0.92, so, I think we have to
the-
account for that.
yeah, the problem that the commission faces is if you do set a particular number, meaning $210,700 as the base salary, it could be that on December 31st of 2021, the mayor is actually making more than that because of the CPIs between now and then. There is that potential. Unlikely, but there is that potential.
So, earlier you were saying not to give an absolute recommend.
I'm trying to encourage the commission to consider, if you set an actual salary number, that there is a danger in that, of the actual salary being a decrease from what the mayor was making. If you set a percentage increase, saying whatever the mayor is making December 31st of 2021, we recommend that the mayor make 1% more than that for their base salary on January 1st of 2022, it could be larger than this number here.
I would like to make I was going to say a motion, but maybe make a suggestion so we don't. I'd like to make a suggestion that we recommend for the mayor 210,700 or an increase of 1%, whichever is higher.
That was where I was.
You don't like that?
No, I think that's,
Okay, I was misreading your body language.
I was moving that direction as well. Certainly, given the large discrepancy now being seen in the CPI outcomes.
And to the point that she was making though, if his whichever is larger, I see that we're saying, that was your
Whichever's
caveat.
larger.
Yes.
Do we have any issues with council being able to do that, approve that? Okay.
Can I ask Mr. Brown that question? What council can't do is spend ahead, right? I mean, they can't pass a legislation. Right, so how do I reconcile that here? If we were to give an exact number, it seems like we are, and council accepts our recommendation, it is a projection of an expense in the future.
It is part of the magic of a commission such as this that you do recommend. And either way that you do recommend, we will take that into consideration as we pass the recommendations. But it will be for a future council to allocate. But we can recommend it in that, and I think that if this is the solution, that it's as elegant as we're gonna get. And I think then you just have to think about how that applies across all the elected positions so that we keep them in the right path, because we're just giving guidance to future councils here as to how these will be put into place, that will have to be allocated then through the budgeting process regardless. But we already do this. It's an annual thing.
Right.
So there are things that you have to do, and this is one of the things we have to do. We're looking for that guidance from citizens to make sure that it is seen as fair and within a competitive marketplace, and making sure that we can retain and get the best talent for all of our elected positions. But this would give us the flexibility, I think, which obviously all councils like to have some flexibility and discretion. So thank you.
Thank you. That clarifies that. So it's purely a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I have a a piece of information here I'd like to point out. This was some additional information that Commissioner Williams asked for last time, if I can draw your attention to it. It's the sheet of paper with the blue table on it.
I don't know that they have that because you only sent it to Commissioner Williams.
Oh, really?
I don't think I have
Oh,
that.
my apologies. I wouldn't have brought it up if you didn't all have it. Wonder if we can make a copy of it. We'll get you a copy of this, or I can show you mine. What I wanted to bring up, the point I wanted to make, is that the percentage increase, what she requested was the percentage increase of our employee groups throughout the city, including both union and non-union employee groups. And we have that information here, going back to the most recent union contract, which are done 3 years at a time. For MCP, the Management Compensation Plan, under which the elected officials fall, we went back to 2016. On average, as you'll see these numbers here, on average, the percentage increase for pay every year for those employees has been 3%. Nationally, we just received the most recognized salary survey for pay increases and pay structure adjustments every year. It's about 3.1% this year. So I wanted to bring this up, and we will make sure you have a copy of this today, that if you're talking about a 1% increase for any elected official in 2022, that may not necessarily match with what other MCP employees are receiving in addition to many other employees. Again, we can't see down
Right.
the road that far, but I can tell you what's been happening.
Does that 3% include a projected COLA, or a COLA is then added to the 3%?
No, it does include a cost of living adjustment.
It replaces the COLA in effect.
I don't know if it replaces it or if you can consider it a pay raise, however you'd like to look at that. I'm not a labor relations professional, but what's negotiated is one amount, and on average, that's what it is. It's about 3%. MCP employees have received 3% in all of the years 2016, 2017, and 2018.
That was the point I was trying to make before, and that is recognizing the COLAs and all this other. Really, when you start talking about salaries in general, 1.48 is much less than what we typically think about when it's just a general statement.
Yeah, Commissioner Weiler, when Greg was mentioning that, I was thinking back to your statement, and I do think that given the uncertainty of the COLA, it may be worth us considering establishing a higher percent base salary increase to guard against, the possibility of that being less, and to ensure that there is some equity here in terms of pay increase as it is occurring with the rest of the city employees. Especially as the city continues, all the factors that we've factored in already, the city continuing to grow, by this time in 2022, where we'll be at in terms of population-wise and the demands that'll be of the position, I think would justify, having a little bit of a larger base pay increase.
Agree.
So, I think I'm still missing something here. In our deliberations, we are assigning a COLA. In the labor negotiations, it's a pure percentage.
It is essentially a cost of living adjustment in the labor negotiations.
But it's not tied to an index. 3% wouldn't be tied to any particular index, I don't think.
Those numbers are reviewed. I can't tell you 100% for sure whether or not there's a direct correlation.
or that 3% comes up or down because of a
I'm
cost of
afraid
living
I
adjustment.
can't answer the question, I'm sorry.
3% does seem to be the standard, though.
What's that?
3% is very much a standard. I know, both.
With COLA or is that it? I guess
I
is
think
the
with
question I
COLA,
have.
that's what I understand it to be, so across the board, so that there is a continuous progression in terms of salary and what that looks like for employees.
So assuming we accept a 3% pay increase, any category we choose, plus 1.48%, so we are proposing an effective rate of 4.48.
Or we could choose to go, a 2% with factoring a 1.48%.
40%, okay.
I think that would be another.
As long as we're all thinking on that level.
And I hate to throw this in there again.
Okay.
But in 2022, that CPI could be
Oh, yeah.
0.92%, it could be
Right.
2%.
Exactly.
And again, it's the arithmetic average of the previous 4 years. So I guess in 2022, it would be, 17 through 21.
But this is the best information
Yes, sir.
we have in front of us
Exactly.
today. So
Exactly.
I'm comfortable that for purposes of our projections, I think we're all saying that number's okay. But I just wanted to be clear about, making sure we were all clear about that COLA will add an additional,
Right.
In the following years, right? Because
or
we're
take,
setting the new.
or reduce, but it'll have an adjusting effect on the 3%, let's say, if we increase the base by 3
Right.
or 2.
So which one do we want?
Well, I think, based on our discussions and with, Mr. Brown's input as I'm thinking about it now, I thought about the council members' changes in terms of percentage. I was using, in my explanation, I was using the 1.99 table to justify it, but I still said, looking at this number, this would constitute a 15% increase. I think 15% is fair based on where we are, all of that. So I think for us to be consistent across the board, the thinking about it in terms of a percentage increase that we, perhaps hope or can project will get them to a certain level of pay in 2022, but regardless, that percentage is substantive. We're saying on merit, whatever you're making, for you to catch up, at least in my opinion, for council in particular, I think it should be this percent, setting it that way. So in the same way with mayor, since we don't know exactly what the number will be, but we can, if we assume the base will be approximately 205,000, and we decide, looking at the other similar public officials, that, is giving a 1% raise, or should it be 3, no matter what they're making, and that's gonna change the base, and we've decided our index, so we know we'll keep buying power on the COLA for the next 4 years, and that's our recommendation, and of course, council doesn't have to accept it. I think that's a good way to think about it, the percent increase and likely where we're putting them. And I think, my original recommendation on the mayor was no change in the base, but I can be swayed. I think our conversations, about, whether it's a 1 to 3% increase on where they expect to be, I'd be in favor of us kind of voting that, because that 3% recommendation is not going to change. We know that no matter, what that number is, they're gonna get an adjustment for the next, if council accepts our recommendation. So I do like overall, I guess, thinking about changing our hard number salary recommendations to a percent recommendation that we've kind of figured out will get them to the hard numbers that we wanted them to be at for salary.
And I also feel comfortable with it. I'll just go on record as saying a 3% to achieve that goal as well.
That would be 3% of whatever 2021 salary reaches.
Correct.
Right.
I think the suggestion is to add 3% to whatever the base salary is in 2021 to be the salary in 2022. And then after that, you would get a COLA.
Now, I think we cannot ignore, although I don't think it's going to sway me, that 3% as it is, as we look across the line, would take them, would take us to about 225. I don't, that to me doesn't cause any big heartburn, but I think we have to at least have some acknowledgement there. The 4-year average is 8%.
Based on these
Right.
projections, yes,
Yes.
the assumptions that we have before us
Right.
now.
And, yeah, and we're talking about 7 years into the future, so, right,
Yes.
so.
Any hesitation?
Yeah, I will be a team player and go along with whatever you want to do.
Well, if you have, but I would love to hear
I'd
further
stick, I'd
consideration.
stick with the 210, 700, or whichever is higher after applying the CPI. But, and my rationale here again, it's not going to break the bank if you start off with another 4,000, 5,000, but we got all this data, and our mayor is second highest of all the others. And I think jumping to 225 is again, when you compare that with where we're coming in with our city council members and chair, it just seems to me that that's high enough. But again, I will not be a dissenting vote. If we want to make everything unanimous, I'm part of it.
Well, I have a proposal. 2%.
That's a fair proposal as well. We've been hovering in between 1 and 3. And Commissioner Weiler, to your point, I think I understand your perspective. My concern I don't see us doing the either or, whichever's this hard number or greater for the other members. So for consistency, I think our recommendation will be more, maybe more clear, more easy for council to digest. If the mayor's the only one that we say 210 or 1%, whichever is higher, but everyone else, we are 15%, 10% raise. There's a possibility with fluctuations in the market that we can't predict that maybe we put our mayor out of lockstep with the other elected officials and where their salaries are, because we could have them, that's all I'm kind of thinking about, inconsistency. But I guess that's what we're here to
Sure.
discuss and hash out what makes the most sense.
If I look at the 2%, I think that's, on here it'd be 212,786, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
projections, yes.
that's the 2,000 difference, I'm with you.
That's the compromise.
Sure.
Okay.
Am I-
Any
am
further
I-
discussion on this?
Commissioner Diana, am I hearing you say that you want to have a fixed number at 2%, or would you still stick with that 212,786, or whichever's higher, applying the percentage?
My recommendation would be to suggest the percentage, 2% increase on whatever the base salary actually ends up being in 2021.
Okay,
And then based on our projections, we think this may be the number, but it could be higher, or it could be lower.
I'm with you.
I will agree to that as well.
Step on.
Do you want a motion to that
Mr. Chairman,
effect?
just so I'm clear.
Should we, well, do we want to do it all at once, or?
Yeah, I just want to be clear, how does the commission want to proceed on voting? Do you want to vote on each elected official's recommendation individually, or do you want to come up with what those recommendations will be and vote collectively at the end?
Let's bring closure. First motion I'll ask for is CPI. What would be the recommendation on the CPI index?
So I move to accept the CPI index, that is the national CPI index that we discussed.
CPIU national.
Yes.
Projected to be 1.48.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Done. Mayor, There's been discussion.
Actually, could we hold off on the vote for the mayor? Because I think after we have some further discussion about some of the other positions, it may be worthwhile to just ensure that before we voted and then have to
Okay.
come back.
That's
Maybe
perfectly
we can
fine.
hold it tentative where we kind of
Yeah.
let the discussion
Well,
at.
okay,
If
we're
that's okay with
tentatively at the
every-
2%.
Yeah, if
We'll
that's
just
okay
keep
with
going.
everyone,
Okay.
yeah.
The next item was council members.
So I'll be honest, this is where I struggled with the recommendation, because I think that council, with the idea that we have in mind of council conducting full-time activity role and the switch to the ward system, and the demands of their time, I really did see this as a more significant increase for council as they move forward in their roles. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I felt like that we have to kind of get them caught up to where they potentially need to be as in terms of their salary, based on where they're at and averages across the country as well. So something I just want to put out there.
Right.
Are there other thoughts?
I agree entirely, knowing our council, forgetting all the other numbers we have, our council members don't call it a full-time job, but it basically is.
Right.
The only question I would have with regard to your statement about when we expand, tell me why you feel that would bring on more work rather than spreading out some of the work among the new members.
Yeah, I think with the ward system, I think there's greater accountability that each council member will have to their specific ward. And knowing that you have a go-to council member that is representing you, I think I believe will increase the amount of access that people will have to a specific council member, even though they'll all be making decisions as a cohort for what happens and what moves forward. And I think also, just given the growth of the city, again, that factor that we have to keep into consideration as we move forward, as we add more residents, I think that's going to be a continued issue for us.
And I agree entirely with what you said.
Great.
I would just add, again, if we start looking comparatively, and I'm not going back to the mayor, but we were talking in the 210 and up. We're talking about city council, a third that number. Somehow that seems like it's an awful low number
Yeah.
relative
Yes.
to what we're recommending for the mayor.
So then I guess we have a decision to consider about whether our recommended increase is a larger catch-up, I guess, for where it's been, as opposed to just a merit. It seems like the hard numbers that we've all recommended hover between 65 and 70,000. My thought had been a 15% increase on the projected 2021 base salary, but I was also thinking about, and I think in line with your comments about maybe a greater catch-up, 20% might be more reasonable, but then I am concerned about the budget and revenues that the city, we're projecting in the future unknown, and with addition of 2 council members and their staff. Now, again, this is just a recommendation, and council doesn't have to take it. They'll take it into consideration, what we've thought about to support it. So that's sort of where I still stand, I guess, somewhere in the 15 to 20% range, which would likely put the salaries for council members in 2022 in the 70 to 75% range, or 70 to 75,000 range, excuse me. And of course, it could be a little less or not, but that might achieve what we're all kind of thinking with their workflow. And, we had some citizen testimony that did want them to be paid, a couple $100,000. Say, you make sure we keep them honest, and, you know, they're all kind of accessible now, even though they don't have wards, and the expectation is anyone, any citizen can get any of the council members basically at any time. And I think the ward system probably will increase that direct accountability in areas that now have specific representation, so I don't necessarily see the workflow or responsibility going down just because we get two more to help.
I actually had a clarifying question, if I might, of the staff. And I think I asked this before, so I apologize if this is me asking the same question again. I just want to be 100% clear. Is it possible for us to recommend a staggered increase over this time period of, you know, so that there wasn't a, you know, one big large increase, so that, you know, could we say in 2022, the pay increase will be 10%, in 2023, it'll be, we recommend an additional merit increase of, you know, 5%, 10%, whatever that might be, that would basically help equalize that, but not be such a all-at-once increase. Does that make sense? And I don't know if that's something we'd want to do or not, but I just thought about whether that's even a possibility.
And I think your concern, your underlying concern is 20% sounds high.
Yes,
Yeah.
and what, yes, exactly. And so that for the, you know, the rest of the citizens in the city, to hear that the city council got a 20% flat out increase, I think might be a little startling, and so I think, you know, trying to stagger that a little bit might help with the delivery of that.
Commissioner Diaz, to answer your question, sir, the charge of the commission is the following. The commission shall submit to the city clerk a report of recommendations for the salary of each elective officer of the city, including an annual cost of living adjustment, which shall not exceed the average increase in the consumer price index or successor thereto during the preceding 4 years. That's what it says. So in our view, then yes, if you were to make that recommendation to city council to do some kind of a staggered adjustment, you're certainly within your limits to do so.
Because even with, and to your point, Dana, with a 15% increase, you know, that in 2025 still only takes them to 75,000, which, you know, I think is still, feels to me on the lower side of where they should be. Back to Commissioner Weiler's comment, in comparison to where the mayor is and where all of the other elected officials are, it just seems for full-time work, that's still really low. So my recommendation would be that we consider, you know, potentially a 10, 10, 5, 5 increase in, or something to that effect that would allow for that to happen in incremental years versus all at once. So something to put out there, or some variation of that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I do as well. And just one of the things, just to I think all of our points as far as where they fall, that I looked at some of the cities with similar populations, and Austin's members are currently at 76,000, Denver at 91, Cleveland at 80,000. So we're still, I mean, I think we're still being fiscally conservative on the salary recommendation, even at a 20% increase. But I do like that, because it can be, that's a big adjustment, and maybe we can spread it out and give a decent sized bump, like starting, like you suggested, starting with 10%. The recommendation for 2022 is a 10% increase on 2021 base salary, and then have one for each of the years.
The other 10% spread over the 4 years?
Potentially.
Or 3
Or-
years, I
3
guess it would be, right? It would be spread so like 3% per year through 2025.
Could someone do the math really quick for us? What would that put us at if we did 10% for the first year, and then subsequently
5, 2.5,
Fi-
and 2.5.
So 10% would take it up to 68,000,
Right, and then,
380. So, and thereafter, 3%, and
That adds another 3,400, 190. So that would get you up to about 71.5.
in year two?
I have 70,431.
in year two?
Yes.
If we did a 3%?
Taking 68,380, or adding 3% to that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that right?
I said 5%.
I did say 5%, but then, we were talking at the same time, so I think I said, what about 5? And you had the adjustment for 3.
Well, I mean, you would like to spread 5 over 3? I mean,
No,
5,
think-
5, and
are you-
5.
Are you recommending, I was recommending, I think 5, 5, 5.
Oh, 5, okay.
Does that make sense?
My mistake, I thought you said
Okay.
3.
Sorry.
No,
We've
I
been-
did.
No, we've been
I
throwing
did.
a couple
Yeah, we've
scenarios
been-
out
okay.
there on
No, I was getting to 20% by taking the 10 up front and then 3, 3, and
So
3.
you'd be going to, it'd be 25% overall time if we did, or you were talking 5 across the whole board, 5% in 2022?
No, sorry.
Or a 10, 5.
5, 5, 5.
5.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that would be an overall 25% recommended increase if we did it that way.
A little more with the compounding.
Right.
Right.
Plus 1.48 a year. So it's,
Right.
If we want to cap the overall increase, if the recommendation would be 20%, I guess we could decide whether, I think that's what I was initially thinking, maybe the first year, 2022, is 10%,
Yep.
and then in decreasing levels for the next 3 years.
I'm open to whatever that would look like. Just be curious to see what this final number.
I have the amounts. If, well, my calculation of the amounts, I hope they're correct. Right. Okay, so starting off in 2022, with a 10% increase from that base salary of 61,257, so 68,380, plus 5% in the year 2023 would be 71,799, plus another 5% in the year 2024 would be 75,389, plus 5% in the year 2025, 79,158.
I'd just like to say 79,158 in the year 2025 does not sound
Yeah.
outrageously high to me.
No.
Me either.
yeah. I agree.
And are you saying that because you'd like to go higher, or just
No,
saying?
I'd like to go there.
Okay, great.
From a PR standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, if people start questioning, why'd you go 25%? We're still under 80,000,
Yep.
what, 7 years from now, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I'm good with that.
All right, can we? Now, well, before we finalize that, are we applying the same formula to the president of council?
I think that I would be in
would.
favor of us doing that.
I would agree with that as well.
And likewise.
That'll make that easier.
So that would take the president probably into the $95,000 more or
I could do the
less.
same scenario for the president if you'd like.
Yeah, 10, 5, 5, and 5.
Okay.
Bob, you and I want to run for 2022, huh?
I'll be happy to be here. Hope I can
So
vote.
it would keep, find the same percentage, would keep them in the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's close.
So I'm saying it's just the same, you're just gonna put the same amount.
Right, so by 2025, it would be about 94,558.
Is anyone offended by that?
No.
No. Actually, if there is a full-time, really full-time person, it is the president of the city.
Yeah.
I mean, in real terms,
The
yeah.
president's gonna be presiding over an additional 2 members. So it's.
Oh, yeah. But even today, he's kind of like if there's something going on in the city and with the
Right.
mayor, he's gonna call the president of the city council to be there to hear what he's hearing, and, you know, it's a little less flexible in his schedule. Okay. Now, city attorney and city auditor. And I will repeat one thing that I think is important. We have heard from council a desire to keep them in lockstep. Okay, which is, that's a policy decision that certainly they are within their purview of making. And I think we all were looking at the comparisons in how we came to our conclusions. With that in mind, let's see, where did we end up with city attorney? Where was the?
Well, we were all from 195 to 210, or 208 to be exact.
But I think there may have been some confusion around some of the base salary numbers, so just so we are on the same page again about what that looks like and where that will be, potentially. Both of their base salaries would be 195,842, assuming that everything holds true.
So are we thinking of a floor of 198,740, which is what it would be based upon the prior commission's recommendations? Am I saying?
The salary, the projected salary for both city attorney and city auditor on December 31st of 2021 is $195,842.
Now, I had recommended, and I was using the 1.99 table, which had a different projected base salary. I think I was using a different number because in my explanation and my reasoning, I see, the percentage I used was a 4% increase for city attorney. But that was based on thinking the base in 2021 was going to be 188. We're looking at this chart. I'm not sure where I got that number from. It's actually, the projected for the table we have now is 195,842. But holding that percentage the same for the city auditor, I had just recommended no change. And again, based on, I think, some assumptions or maybe not knowing exactly what the projected numbers were going to be. So if we're talking about these two and kind of in lockstep, I'm not sure. I personally haven't really delved into or considered the auditor's responsibilities and the difference in our city auditor's role versus other comparators in the public sector. I don't know if any of you have, or in considering increasing them both, if we need to talk about that more or look back at some of our other materials to be able to make that recommendation. So I don't want to interrupt the city attorney discussion since we're on that one, but since their salaries are currently the same, and if we're talking about keeping those in line, what I initially recommended is inconsistent with that, and I'd like to, get enough information or have enough discussion to make an informed recommendation for both of these positions.
So, Commissioner, you do have in the materials that I gave you today a memorandum from Mike Brown, the Chief of Staff for City Council, that lays out a little more fully some of the recommendation, or some of the responsibilities
Okay.
of the city auditor as compared to city auditors in other cities. It is my understanding that the Columbus City Auditor should be treated somewhat of a chief financial officer for the city, and given the budget for the city of Columbus has a tremendous amount of responsibility, in comparison to some of our peer cities. So I don't know if that fully gives you a picture for the auditor's office, but I would encourage that, although the 2015 commission did actually recommend that this commission and future commissions consider whether or not there needs to be parity between the two offices of city attorney and city auditor, the historic trend has been to treat those two offices as similar enough in responsibility and duty, training and education, that they should be considered the same.
Okay.
Okay, but there's a uniqueness reality here in that City Auditor Dorian, how many, 50 years? I mean, so I kind of, I maybe, I don't know where this parity, where in that 50 years did this parity question arise? Was it always the same? Or did it come about to compensate for long-term service? Compensate the auditor for long-term service?
I can only answer from what the 2015 report stated, which was that for several years, the auditor and the city attorney had been paid equal amounts.
Sure. The record, we could find that information, sir, should the commission want us to do that digging.
Well, let's look at this, let's take this from a different angle, a different approach. Because I'm hoping to have all the information we need to make all the decisions we need to make before we leave today. So let me be outspoken on my goal.
Great.
I think it's difficult for us to ignore the comparable information. I just think I don't think we can put a blinder on to the fact that this is a higher paid city auditor than comparable cities that were selected. I also will acknowledge that Mr. Dorian, in being with the city as long as he had, sacrificed. He was he could have made a lot more out on the outside than he did on the inside, and so I kind of see that those things must come together at some point. They must be hitting at some point. We don't have a city attorney to say, you've been here for that length of time, reelected time and time over. So there is a question. I think there is a legitimate question as to whether or not they remain in parity, the two offices, because we're now back to a balance. We have a new city attorney and a new city auditor. You know, we're kind of at a good point to have to discuss this issue. I think it would have been very difficult, given the tenure and long-term service of Mr. Dorian, to do that.
Do you think the auditors?
I don't want to reduce from where we are. That's not my intention. Let me put that out there. But I do believe that we could be assigning different numbers to each office.
The commission certainly has that ability.
And the council can make a policy decision, they want to keep it
Can't make
the
a
same.
policy decision, but we cannot increase one, but we can't lower the other. So
Yes.
in the need for parity, you should probably come in knowing that that is the only option that the council would have. Should the council share many people's opinion that these should be kept at a very equal balance because of the demands and the uniqueness of this office, that not only did we have someone who served long, was rewarded in a grateful city for all their oriented service, but he was also so very good at the job that he took on powers and responsibilities that far outstrip those we think of many comparable peer cities. And if that information hasn't been provided, we've attempted to do a quick version of it today as we looked into this, but we are more than happy to prepare other information to bring before the commission at, I believe, a future meeting in a week or so. And we will help take that responsibility on because we think this is so important for a discussion on equal pay, parity issues, and these two positions, and the uniqueness of the roles that our city auditor plays that we don't think all city auditors play. So we think it is a great conversation and question for this group, but it has come to our attention, and we're taking it very seriously, and I'm happy to read this into the record, but you also have a paper copy.
We'll put this into the record.
Thank you, sir.
But here's my challenge to that logic. To the extent that additional responsibilities were given, taken from A to B because of everything you said about Mr. Dorian, I'm projecting another election or two out. We might find that auditor needs to put it back to where it originally was, right? That they aren't functioning at the level of a Mr. Dorian and 50 years of service. And so I think it creates how much money are we talking about? Probably into something under $5,000 when it all washes through the system, what we're talking about. But there is something here that I think has to be, and we can kick it too. We can say, the next commission, you look at this. I mean, that we could also kick the bucket too, but just want to put it out there, and we'll come to the appropriate conclusions.
Fred, are you in favor of the auditor having a greater increase than the city attorney would based on responsibilities, or are you of the other mind? Like when you've questioned whether keeping them in parity, it makes sense, and you've already said you don't want to lower anyone's salary.
I didn't want to lower anyone's salary, but that didn't mean that I would increase one over the other.
Okay.
Okay? I'm comfortable with where we start. I'm projecting 11 years out. And one of the uniquenesses here is we had one person doing this job for a very long time. Yes, he could have been mayor, he could have been a council member, he could have done a lot from the perch from which he sat over that length of time. And, I don't know that a future auditor will have that same view and knowledge and background. And, if we're dealing with election years, it's kind of, how do we do this? Or just save it for the next commission, reviewing the performances, listening to council and others, whether or not they have concerns, along these lines. But I don't think, but we have to somehow, in my opinion, we can't just simply ignore the fact that in other communities, and this helps support some of that, but it was a pretty large spread. And this, let's say this covers, this gives us some explanation to give us some comfort, but is it enough to cover the spread? That's to be debated. That's not, I have no answers. I kind of formulate the question.
I think Commissioner Weiler was going to say something.
I'd like to, as much as I hate to let go of Auditor Dorian, I really think we have to look forward and ask ourselves, what do we project the responsibility of these two positions? And in my mind, the auditor position has taken on, as the statement says here, has taken on a much greater role than it most likely takes on in other cities. And forgetting the personalities, I am inclined to keep them in lockstep since there's already a recommendation. And if we were to just look at the professions without the personalities and without the city, I think we might come to a conclusion that a top-rate lawyer might have a higher salary than a top-rate auditor, not necessarily, but by profession. To me, that's not, again, the compelling reason for my suggesting that we keep them together is that in our city, what I can best project based upon the last decades is that the auditor will have a important role to play, a very important role. Now, that could change, and if it changes, yeah, then let's leave that to the next commission. But as we see it today, I see the current auditor, Kilgore, and of course, we're not sure who it will be at this time, but I do see that position, as it has historically been, as an extremely important position, and as is the city attorney. And so, for lack of anything better, I recommend we keep him in lockstep. That's just my personal feeling.
I would agree with that statement. I also think, as a city that is wanting to retain its talent, in terms of who we have in these positions, and ensuring that they are properly compensated, given the portfolio of their responsibilities, I would also be in favor of keeping them in lockstep. And I think that I will go even further to say that I believe they would warrant the same type of increase that we'd be providing the mayor's office in terms of percentage increase to their position in order to ensure that they were properly being compensated as we move forward.
Yeah, I think in thinking about the role in reading Mike's memo, providing some more information, our auditor as more of a CFO rather than just an auditor, I would change my initial recommendation of no change in salary to be in parity with an increase for the city attorney. I'm actually, the more that, in reading this and thinking about this, I didn't give the city auditor the attention that I gave to the other offices in assessing the salary. So I'm actually considering whether our auditors should be higher increase than the city attorney. But short of that, and that's just something I've just started to consider, whether it actually should be a recommendation higher, and of course, city council could say, no, it's gonna be lower, but whether the functions of this office, like Bob, you said comparable, the head of a legal department, an attorney versus an auditor, are pay and set, but versus a CFO of a company, that CFO is gonna make more money in most cases than, the department head maybe of a legal team in-house, or they're going to be more in parity. So then we're kind of circling back around parity again in the salaries,
You're
so.
absolutely right, because our auditor is more than a typical auditor that might be at other cities.
Yeah. So I think at a minimum, I would, and maybe we need some more time to think about, at a minimum, I would be in favor of keeping their increases in parity. I had suggested a 4% increase in the city attorney base salary. And, my hard numbers are different because I was using a different projection, but I was looking at, the city attorney of cities with comparable populations, Denver, Austin, who currently have their city attorneys make relatively significantly more, 224 in Denver. Who else, which one was, no, Austin's at 224, Denver is at 196. That's about, I think, we're currently at 186 for our city attorney.
Yeah.
So 10 and 20,000 more that those cities' attorneys make right now. So that's where I kind of came to a number, a 4% increase that would, well, of course, we're future too, but would move us closer to where those salaries are for the city attorney. That was kind of my reasoning based on population size, responsibility, the public they're accountable to. And so, that's not my hard recommendation. I want to think about it again a little more. That's why I started out at 4% increase, but then I would be in line to say that they both should get a 4% increase on the 2021 base salary, and that be the recommendation, while I'm also kind of considering whether the auditor's increase should be slightly higher.
Okay. So I got a 2%, maybe a 4%.
I said 3.
3%, with the same, whatever you would put it in line with what we're gonna do for the mayor. I think that's
Yeah.
what you, do you have an opinion about this issue?
I'm with the rest of our team here.
And I can,
Well, there's a couple of things we can resolve today. One is, one question was, do we maintain the parity? And I'd like a motion on that question. A recommendation that we move forward.
I move we keep the parity.
I'll second.
Any other discussion on that question? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Done. Second question, I think, was the question left for this commission that we ask the next commission. It's kind of a monitoring kind of thing, but I guess it applies to both city attorney and the auditor, because it's hard for us to project what a million-plus city
Yeah.
attorney and a million, it's hard to project that, but let's forget that. Let's forget number 2, because that probably it's probably already embedded in the whole idea of this commission, that they think about those issues. So we can eliminate that. Next question, I think, with respect to these 2 offices, is what is the appropriate percentage? I hear a 3 and I hear a 4.
I could go-
Oh, no, I'm sorry, there was a second question as to whether, well, that would break parity if you,
Right.
so, did your vote resolve that we're going to vote in parity, or?
I would, with the group being in favor of parity, at a minimum, I'm in favor of that, and maybe it would be, my thought would be a recommendation. And again, I was thinking higher for the auditor, perhaps, and considering this role, and maybe that's something that a future commission can evaluate. I am okay with keeping them in parity, though.
Okay.
And I'm okay with 4%.
I think it might be a greater undertaking, and keeping in mind that what we're doing here is not a merit increase on the official who's in there. That might be where my mind is going on this now, reading Mike's memo and thinking about them in a CFO context, and perhaps that's outside of what we need to accomplish, and being charged with looking at peer cities and peer roles and what the job responsibilities are, what the position merits. So I did vote, that was something I was throwing out there for discussion, but with all of us in favor of parity, I am good with that.
3% or 4%?
Let's see.
I'm okay with 4%.
4% on the,
With 4% too.
okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and start locking in. Are there any other do we cover everybody at this point, all the offices?
Yep.
I think we have.
I think so too.
Okay, so first there will be a request for a motion on the percentage increase
Okay.
of mayor. Are we still gonna go or higher, whichever's higher?
No, we were
No,
doing
I
a.
think-
We're just gonna lock
I
in
think
onto the
I think
percentage.
we're gonna lock into 10.5 and then 3 5s, 10%.
Well,
That was
said the
council.
mayor,
This is
so-
the mayor.
Oh, for
So
the mayor,
I'll
excuse me.
move to accept, or to propose a 3% increase to the mayor's base salary, as we,
The earlier suggestion was a 2% increase in the base salary that exists on December 31st of 2021. No, they didn't.
Yes, that was right, 2%.
I think I think 2% was the compromise we were coming to.
Oh, sorry, I
But-
apologize.
But we did say we wanted to discuss everything because
Yeah.
it might change our perspective coming back to mayor again. So I don't know if that our rest of the discussions have changed, Bob, where you fall, or Fred on like a 2%.
I'm good with 2%, but I wouldn't fight you on 3.
Yeah,
But
I feel the same way.
keep in mind, our mayor is at a high number, starting at a high number. And
Right, so
again,
we're not playing catch-up necessarily this
Right.
term,
We're
like I think
not.
they were last, right? Or was that? Yeah.
That definitely was a consideration.
sorry, I may have missaid that then. So are we 2% or 3%?
2%.
Okay, 2%. So a move to increase the mayor's salary 2% for our recommendation as we move this forward.
And that would be for the 2022 recommended salary would be a 2% increase on the 2021 base pay.
That's
Okay.
correct.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Because it's presented separately, let's do the council and then let's do a president. So, and this is where we come to the 10, 5.
Correct.
5 and 5. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to set the council member's salary for 2022 at a 10% increase on the 2021 base salary then in effect, to set the 2023 salary at a 5% increase on the base that is in effect from the previous year, to set the 2024 salary at a 5% increase on the base salary that is in effect the previous year, and a 2025 salary that is a 5% increase on the base salary then in effect in 2024.
I second that.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
None.
All in
I'll
favor?
second.
I think I have.
Oh, sorry, I
motion
didn't know
and
if
a
you
second.
seconded. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. I'm going to ask you to do
I'll
that
do,
again.
I'll do the rest. I'll make a motion to set the president of council's salary for the year of 2022 at a 10% increase in the base salary then in effect in 2021, to set the 2023 salary at a 5% increase in the base salary then in effect for the previous year, to set the 2024 salary at a 5% increase in the base salary then in effect from the previous year, and a 2025 salary at a 5% increase in the base salary then in effect the previous year.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Now, before we move on city attorney and city auditor, do we first discuss this in lockstep with the mayor on the 2, but I think most of our discussion was around 3. So, how we want to work through that one?
I'm still
I'm
okay with,
comfortable either way.
I'm still okay with the 4% increase
4%?
for the city auditor and city attorney.
Okay.
City auditor, and I'll note too, our current projections have the city attorney and city auditor at 195,842 base salary in 2021, based on the chart we had from Greg today. And that same table projects our 2021 mayor's base salary for 2021 to be at 205,571. So in terms of hard numbers right now, these leadership positions are about $10,000 apart. So a 4% increase on the city auditor and city attorney would move them a little bit closer to the mayor, but with a 2% on mayor, they'll still have some distance in base pay. And they're not too far apart now. I think probably for good reason on what the roles entail. So I'll leave to discussion whether, 4% or 3%, what we feel comfortable doing.
Commissioner Diana, if you'll make the motion, I think 4% is what, I think we've agreed on.
Okay. I'll make a motion to set the city attorney salary for the year 2022 at a 4% increase on the 2021 base salary.
Second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? And I'll just make for the record, all having been adjusted to the new CPI
Correct.
projections. National CPI, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the only final matter, if it's not a matter of record, we did want this to be part of our, the memo from Mr. Brown to be part of our record. Okay.
I think then we just need, I'll make the final motion on auditor, since I
Oh, that's right,
I did the
that's true.
position
It's just
individually.
yeah, and that, as you should.
So I'll make a motion to set the city auditor's salaries, starting in the year 2022, at a 4% increase on the base salary then in effect in 2021.
A second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Okay.
What remains for this commission?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, on behalf of the mayor, city council, the city attorney and the city auditor, we thank you for your service. We will put all of your recommendations into a report that will be submitted to the city clerk for city council's consideration prior to the end of this calendar year. Once that report is finalized, I will ensure that each commissioner gets a copy of that report. But beyond that, I think that we can thank you for your service and your consideration and dismiss you from your meeting on the 19th.
The only other thing, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, something we did, the Commissioners did 3 years ago, is to send out that gratitude, to show appreciation to all of the other cities who took time out of their schedules to complete the salary survey and provide data and be there for follow-up questions and things like that. Certainly, we will, and we've told them in advance, we'll provide the results of the salary survey, and many of them are waiting on those results too. They would love to see those results. But also, something we did last time is we created a memo that each of the commissioners signed, just thanking those other cities. So you'll see something from us, if that's okay, that we do again.
You'll see a letter from me also that
yeah.
goes in the report that everybody's signature will go on.
And we'll make sure we get that out to the cities.
As to the presentation to city council, how does that work? Who's going to take that responsibility?
Mr. Chairman, you and I will take that responsibility.
Okay.
And thank you guys.
Thank you
your
all
help.
for your help.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't express our gratitude for all the time you spent gathering all the data for us. And help.
I would say that this, here, we are lucky here in the city of Columbus because we do things correctly, I believe, and this is another, I think, example of the fact that we are deliberative, we do give thought, and we do exchange ideas before reaching conclusions. And I do believe all of our citizens are better off because of that. And To each of you who have scrambled to answer our smart questions and our not-so-smart questions in a way that we could interpret and understand and come to the conclusions that we have. We're all extremely appreciative, and if I need to say that to somebody else, you let me know, and I definitely will convey that.
It'll be on YouTube.
All right, well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed, yes. We are adjourned.